course, so for those that don't know, Sky TV is a quite popular TV service within the UK and other countries. There are about 11 million subscribers to Sky TV. They had, I'm sure it was on a Wednesday, they had World Cinema. So similar to, I guess, the concept of this podcast, that helped me discover a lot of foreign movies, not necessarily foreign language. Some of them were in English, but just produced in other countries. So I watched quite a lot of the movies that came on the World Cinema Day. And Spud was one of those movies. So set in South Africa, so that's why that when you suggested the podcast, this is the first movie that I thought of, because I remember really loving this movie and the series of movies. So Spud is part of a trilogy of movies, and based on a popular book series. There were 4 books, 3 movies, set in a boarding school. It's a coming-of-age film. The main character is John Milton, and most, I guess, the actor portraying him has since gone on to become a pop star, so Troye Sivan. But he started off in acting. One of the key things is each of the characters within the movie have a nickname. So not just the pupils, but also the teachers. So set during the 1990s, John Milton, after the other boys see him in the shower, he has no pubic hair, so they nickname him Spud. He is sent to an elite boarding school for boys. I guess there's quite a class difference too. So we learn that Spud is there on a scholarship. When he first arrives at the school, his parents drive him, and they're in a broken down car. The other boys have to actually help them to get driving again. So I think there's maybe like an undertone of that's one of the reasons that Spud initially doesn't fit in with the other boys. But Spud is quite a loner, finds it difficult to make friends. There is another boy within his dorm, who is a similar age. They become quite close friends. We also learn that Spud is very well read. He befriends one of his teachers, played by John Cleese, nicknamed the Gov. He provides, of course, Spud with a lot of books to read. They have regular discussions on those books. And there's also a few love interests for Spud, both in this movie and throughout the series. So a storyline throughout the trilogy of the movies and the book series. Spud learns that the school are performing Oliver Twist and decides to audition for that, eventually gaining the lead role. And also his main friend is Gecko, who is a pale, sickly boy. There's a lot of comedy about that he's quite accident prone, that he's always visiting the nurse. Unfortunately, Gecko does die later in the film after contracting cerebral malaria. And towards the end of the movie, Spud performs in the school play, gets a standing ovation. The boys, also known as the Crazy Eight, witness him kissing a girl, Debbie, nicknamed Mermaid, and he finally fits in with the other boys. So I remember watching this, really loving it at the time, and I think a really good coming-of-age film. Quite similar to Dead Poets Society. There's like elements of that which you can find in this film. But I guess, what does everyone else think of the film?
There was some things I found interesting, some things not. It was clearly in the light an attempt in irony, but I don't think many of the performances encapsulated that, except perhaps John Cleese. Also, I have to give marks down to any visual representation of throwing books into your bin, especially things like Virginia Woolf.
Yeah, I liked it. Like, I thought it was, it didn't blow me away, but it was sort of like a fun funny film that, I found myself liking the main character and sympathizing with him a bit. It did remind me a lot of going to an all-boys school, and I think it captures that sense of juvenile crassness and like this weird system of rules and like peer pressure and this weird hierarchy and some of the different personalities that you find in an all-boys school, especially like around middle school, or like just when they're just past puberty, when they just like have all of this energy and all of this like sexual energy and curiosity, but they're too immature to know what to do with it. And that sense of just wanting to stand out and like be unique and be your own person, but also wanting to fit in. That's a really struggling and messy and often embarrassing thing. And yeah, I thought it captured that quite well.
I have a soft spot in my heart for this film. I haven't seen it since it came out, but I actually have read the books. And I think it captures something of the loveliness of... It's quite rare, isn't it, to get a film where there's an ensemble group of kids and you really feel that they're a group of friends and you get all their quirkiness and all their little petty... I went to an all-girls school, very similar kind of dynamic. And I think there is something quite touching and endearing about that. And I think some of those issues about, the nicknames and the people who are seen as weird and then, if you kiss a girl, you're one of the cool cut guys now. I mean, that it's all very enduring, isn't it? So I think this is a really charming film. And yeah, I've been thinking a lot about different educational structures, and the concept of being a scholarship kid at an elite school, boarding, single sex versus non-single sex. I've just gone onto the board of a very prestigious but mixed boarding school in the UK. So I've been thinking a lot about how it all works and how those sort of codified structures all work. And I think this is a really charming, kind of wears it lightly, but does touch on some of those themes about how we set up the ways in which our kids are going to interact. So yeah, I like this one.
I didn't really get the sense that they were friends or that Spud was really friends with any of the other boys except for that one kid. It always felt like he was trying to get into the group or trying to impress them or at least just try not to be bullied by them, but it never felt, I don't know, it always just felt like a sort of an uneasy alliance rather than like genuine friendship. Or it didn't even, I don't know, it's weird to think of them as friends. It was more just like they were a gang of boys who enjoyed just causing havoc. I don't know. Maybe that is friendship in a way among boys, but yeah, it always felt a bit
maybe that's as
temporary.
Good as it gets with boys in middle school. I mean, is that as good as it gets? I don't know.
I think in a way it is, because it's like you're only there together because you have to, and you kind of just do fun things together. But I think the only genuine friendships he had was with that one white-haired kid and the teacher. I think the other boy, I don't know, I never really got a strong connection between him and the other boys. And in fact, a few of them were pretty mean to him. So I don't know. Maybe in the book there's a bit more bonding.
Just on the second rewatch of it, one thing that I thought was really sweet was that Gecko is the only person that doesn't call him Spud. He calls him Milson. So I thought that's like a sign of friendship.
Yeah, and I think like towards the end of the film, there's a bit more respect because he's immediately an object of ridicule, and even when he gets into the play, they make fun of him relentlessly from that, which I guess you can see is a form of not intimacy, but that is a form of friendship. For like we don't often high school boys don't know how to show affections, so they show it through ridicule and mockery, and that's kind of how it works. But towards the end, it definitely felt like he was in the group, and that was, I guess, part of his triumph, that he'd found himself. So he'd made it through the social obstacles or the social games and come out on top.
Yeah, well, I didn't get the impression that they were that friendly to each other, to be honest, but I do think like stories about building social capital, especially when there's class disparities, are important and obviously relevant to general culture. Pretty much anywhere, like you'll have like people being like considered nouveau rich, and being excluded based on that premise of not being able to develop the social capital needed to properly elevate to the class, even though they have the economic or institutional capital like education or money. Like even then, like they'll be excluded on sometimes silly reasons, like because of like what they eat or what they wear or things like that.
Yeah, and there's obviously like they go over the different ways you can gain status in the group, whether you're good at sports or good with women or whatever it is. And he sort of flirts with trying on those different roles in order to ingratiate himself. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. Like that experience is pretty universal, I guess, for everyone in high school. Like you're figuring out who you are and you're trying to fit in, and it's that interplay between what you want as a person and also not knowing what you want as a person and trying on different things and seeing how that fits in with people. But it was strange because I never really got the sense that he like broke out as his own person. It always felt like he was sort of playing to the expectations of the other kids. It never felt like he quite gained a sense of his self. I don't know. It was weird. Like there's that one moment where he's getting teased by them and he tells them to get lost and then sort of screams out the window. And I guess they all kind of respect him for that. But that was as close as he got to sort of pushing back against the peer pressure. The sort of his triumph is that he kisses a girl and they all see him kiss the girl and they all like him and think that's cool. I don't know. That didn't quite feel like a sort of a triumph of self-identity or...
But again, I think that's as good as it gets. I mean, when do you feel you triumphed over your self-identity? I mean, maybe I was 32. I don't know. I mean...
yeah. And of course, he hasn't even hit puberty. He hasn't even hit puberty by the end of the film. So
yeah, exactly.
It's all pretty
Baby
early
steps,
days.
Boys. Baby
I know. Maybe that's just me just thinking about like, oh, but this is meant to be the trajectory of a film. But no, of course not. It's a kid. He's just trying his best. I did have a question. Why do you guys think the film was set when it was? Because it was set in 1990, and it was kind of against the backdrop of Mandela's release and, you know, towards the end of apartheid, and that plays into some of the narrative of the film. But like, why? What was important about setting it as making it a period piece as opposed to just setting it in 2010? What did that add to the film, do you think?
You know, I did think
I genuinely don't know.
Same. I was looking into it thinking, well, I see that the book series was published in 2005. So the first book was published in 2005. And I thought maybe like a J.K. Rowling situation. She started writing the books in the 90s, which is why the books are set in the 90s. But then I had thought, maybe if the author was in boarding school himself in the 90s. But then I see that he was born in 1975, so he would have just been finishing school around that time. So no, I don't know.
Well, I guess he would have been a teenager in the early 90s, so maybe there's a biographical element to it. Maybe it was important that it was before mobile phones and the internet and stuff. Like it was just this sort of snapshot of a particular point in time. But yeah, the stuff with Nelson Mandela and the apartheid seemed a bit thinly explored. Like it was like either have it and make it a big part of the story or don't. It just felt, but maybe that's the point. It's like it's just part of the fabric of South Africa. You can't really escape it, even if you're a kid who's just trying to make it through classes and make friends at high school. That all that stuff is in the background, and it sort of played into his crazy parents and their weird relationship or their weird sort of conspiracy theories and things like that. So maybe it was part of that general embarrassment about having a dysfunctional family.
Yeah, I agree with you, Duncan. I think you either do it properly or don't. It's such a big thing. I was just thinking, is it that because post-apartheid, those single-sex elite boarding schools didn't exist or were different? Is that the last era of that kind of institution? I have no idea whether that's true or not.
I don't know, but the boarding school obviously had black and white students, so I don't see why the end of apartheid would have changed things that much, but it might have. I don't know.
True.
Does his father's anti-communism develop later in the books, or was that just a bit of flavour felt like that seemed important and would
No, it does. Yeah, it is. It is important. And actually, I was going to ask Jock, do you know if there were any follow-ups made? Do you know if it sort of, they did do all of them, it's just this is the one that got to the UK?
Oh, they did. Three of the books were made into films. There was a fourth book, but that was never made into a film.
Yeah, I think it almost came to fruition. Like they had a script and they had financing, but the main star sort of took off as a YouTube singer sensation.
Oh yeah.
So that kind of became his career, and they didn't want to recast him. But might happen one day.
Sign of the times. There you go.
Yeah, the encroachment of social media and TikTok ruined that. Would you recommend the sequels, Glenn?
I really liked them. They weren't as good as the first film, but from memory, I think they put on the first film on Sky Cinema, and then I don't think they even waited until the next week. It was just they put on the first film, then the next day it was the second film, then the third day it was the third film. So I watched them within like a few days. So I really did like them and the series as a whole, but I think the standout is the first film.